All right, we're going to read Peter Pan Chapter 2, narrated by Dad. An unbelievable event was about to shatter the peaceful life of the Darling family. But there was no hint of it as Mrs. Darling helped her children get ready for bed one night. It was Nana's night off. The mother gave the children their baths and sang them to sleep. As she sat sewing in the nursery, she too fell asleep. She dreamt that the Neverland came to close and that a strange boy broke through its curtain and approached. Wendy, John, and Michael. And, in fact, while she was dreaming, a boy did enter the room through the open window. He dropped swiftly to the floor, dressed in a suit of leaves. He carried a small light as he flittered about the nursery. The light awakened Mrs. Darling. She gasped, knowing at once that it was Peter Pan. When she regained her breath, Mrs. Darling screamed in fright. Nana had just returned from her evening out and came bounding through the door. She sprang at the boy, but he flew quickly out the window and disappeared into the night in the form of a shooting star. Nana closed the window too late to capture Peter, but she caught his shadow. The dog hung the shadow out the window, figuring that Peter could come back and pick it up without coming into the house and bothering the children. The next morning, Mrs. Darling decided that hanging a shadow outside the house would ruin the look of the whole neighborhood. She rolled it up and placed it carefully in a drawer. There it stayed until the following Friday. If only I hadn't accepted the invitation to dinner at number 27, Mrs. Darling moaned afterward, whenever she remembered that dreadful Friday evening. If only I hadn't poured my medicine into Nana's bowl, cried Mrs. Darling. The evening had both started and ended badly. First, Michael refused to take a bath and kept climbing off Nana's back when she tried to carry him to the tub. Then Mr. Darling, who hated to get dressed up in party clothes, couldn't knot his tie. Next, Nana brushed against Mr. Darling, covering his new suit with dog hairs. Finally, there was a problem with Michael's medicine. Nana held it on a spoon in her mouth, but Michael refused to take it. Be brave, Michael. Be a man, his father said. When I was your age, I always took my medicine. How about taking it now, suggested John. I mean that medicine that you sometimes take? But it tastes disgusting, protested Mr. Darling. It can't be as bad as mine, chirped Michael. It's worse, answered his father. I have an idea, said Wendy. Why don't you both take your medicine? Before Mr. Darling could object, she ran into the bathroom and returned with the bottle and a spoon. Now both of you take it at the same time, she ordered. Michael swallowed his medicine obediently, but Mr. Darling slipped his behind his back. Father, scolded all three children. Feeling ashamed, Mr. Darling tried to turn their attention away. I'll tell you what, he said. I'll put some medicine into Nana's bowl, and she'll think it's milk. Mrs. Darling and the dog came into the room. Come here, Nana. Don't touch your phone, said Mr. Darling, and drink this milk. The children stared at him in anger, but did not dare to criticize him. Nana lapped up the milk from the bowl, then let out a painful cry and crept to her kennel. The children sobbed. Stop feeling sorry for that dog, Mr. Darling shouted at them. I've had quite enough of her trying to be the boss of this family. I won't let her stay in the nursery one more night. He seized the dog, dragged her outside to the yard, and tied her to a tree. Then he sank into a chair, not daring to face the children after performing this wicked deed. Mrs. Darling tucked the children into their beds, lit their night lights, and prepared to leave the room. Outside, they could hear Nana barking. "She's so unhappy," said John. "That's not her unhappy bark," Wendy corrected him. "That's the way she barks when she smells danger." Mrs. Darling went nervously to the window. It was securely fastened, but she remained fearful. "If only I didn't have to go to a dinner party tonight," she thought to herself. The children sensed her fear. "Can anything harm us when the night lights are lit?" asked Michael. "No, sweetheart," she answered. "They are the eyes that a mother leaves behind to guard her children when she goes to bed." Michael flung his little arms around her neck. "I love you," he murmured. Those were the last words that she would hear from any of her children for a terribly long time. Mr. and Mrs. Darling walked to the party at number 27. The stars watched from above. They knew that Peter Pan was planning something important and was waiting for the grown-ups to get out of the way. How he hated grown-ups. Let the fun begin, Peter," whispered the smallest star as the elder Darling entered number 27. That's the end of chapter 2.